Right.
All right, so we are talking today to my friend Brad Schuster from the Colorado market. He works for Keesen Landscape, where I am friends and ex-colleagues of many of the staff there. It's full of people that I used to work with in my field days. So I really appreciate you making time, Brad. I know as branch manager, you are super busy, so every minute is valuable, and I appreciate you spending some with me.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Today, we are really going to take a look at what should an HOA expect when switching to WeatherTRAK. And as such, we want to do a couple of things. I want to first walk you through the sales process. We're going to have kind of a high level talk about the sales process. But the reason that I think Brad is so great for this conversation is Brad has a very unique sales type, where Brad does not ever soft soap anything. Where some salesmen have a tendency to walk on eggshells, Brad goes in like a bull in a china shop and lays it all out for people, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, puts it all on the table, and then walks them through the benefits and the costs and the what really to expect. And I thought that would be a great conversation to capture and add into the library. So we're going to talk about the whole process, starting in the field, starting with the Easter eggs and laying the foundation, through the getting the sales meeting and what happens in that sales meeting, some of the resources we have. And then we'll get into that what to expect conversation, right? We'll talk about all of the kind of warnings that Brad gives of it's not all roses. There are bumps in the road. And here's what we can expect as far as bumps in the road. Does it sound fair, Brad Schuster? Is that what we talked about?
Yeah, that's good. And just for what it's worth, I'm not sure if you're sharing your screen or not, but I do not see it. So
no,
cool.
I bounce back and forth from our faces to the screen.
Got it.
When I don't need the screen, I don't use it.
Very good. Okay, cool.
So,
sounds good.
Totally.
Cool.
So we will jump back there right now.
Cool.
Make sure. And we will go up to the PowerPoint. We are going to start with a conversation about what we hope everybody is familiar with, right? Brad is a branch manager and talking at the highest level, but through branch manager, account manager, even the field folks, the irrigation techs and the lawn crew, we hope that anyone who is customer facing is familiar with really the risks and costs of unmanaged water and how we have a solution for that, right? So many of the HOAs that Brad talks to, he talks to about how they're paying too much, right? That is definitely, in my eyes, the bell that rings the loudest. Would you agree, Brad?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll kind of talk about specifically on one property, which is a patio home community that has the landscape all the way up to basically their doorstep. So, Ben, in my experience on that side too, I mean, it's easy just to be able to start throwing out proposals on, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, right? But to truly understand things, you need to, like, I always feel more comfortable and confident is knowing how the irrigation system works, right? Knowing how efficient the irrigation system is just by looking at it, by talking with the irrigation techs, by talking with the crew that's on site, by talking with the account managers, and then to understand, like you had said, the true pain points of the property, right? Not just from the property manager, but from like the board of directors. Like, what is their biggest expense? And like with a patio home community like that, landscape, irrigation, water bills is a massive thing, snow removal. So, hey, how can we as a professional landscape company, how do we help them out, right? And you can't help them out until you understand all that. Sometimes if you just go in there and start throwing out, hey, we got to throw in some smart controllers, it's just one small piece of that whole entire thing, but you've got to understand the why before you can just, hey, this is what we recommend,
That's great. Totally on point, right? And getting to know your customer. I'm a student of Chris Manchuk, who is constantly in every meeting talking about the value of listening and hearing, and what is your customer trying to tell you, and what problem are we trying to solve. But it's also important as the professionals that we are familiar with all of the nuance, right? What they understand is the wasted water and the high water bills, but they don't understand that wasted water and high water bills are only a part of the conversation, right? We have property damage, we have disruption to operations, depending on the type of site you have, right? HOAs are less like that, but the Dallas Cowboys certainly take that seriously. And brand damage, right? You can't tout yourself as a huge, great water manager and still be watering after rainfall, or having broken heads right along the
water
street.
Run down the road.
Exactly right.
Can't do it. No
if you want to walk the walk, you got to walk the walk. And so
Exactly.
you tie your brand to that, and then you got to walk the walk. And then one that I take personally, only because I just lived it, that the liability is a real thing. The last day of irrigation at my house, my wife, it was icy. The irrigation ran and my wife slipped and broke her ankle. So that is a real deal, people. Liability, slip and fall cases are a real cost. All right. So now let's talk about when you are looking at their irrigation system, right? When you start to lay the foundation, either with the customer or your field folks, right? What is it that you focus on that WeatherTRAK provides as a solution?
Sure. So like I'll get the information especially from the irrigation techs, right? After you kind of, go through a few months and seeing how it operates and seeing, where we're overwatering, where we're underwatering, what are the controllers out there now? How old is the irrigation system? Approximately how efficient it is without having to run a true, water audit. Once you kind of understand all the small details of that, then it's like, okay, now I've got the field side of it here. Now let's talk with the client and let's understand where their points of pain are. Let's find out, is it just the amount of, if it's just pure dollars on that? Hey, we've got a budget of here. We're always up here on the water budget. How do we reduce that? What can we do not only on the water side, but then also too, we've got plant material dying, or they're stressed out. How do we, increase the value of our landscape and increase the curb appeal of that property? So then understanding the irrigation side and then understanding the customer side of things, then it kind of gives you a roadmap of, hey, you know what, this is the next step on this one was like, guys, your controllers are old. You had, on this particular instance, they were older ET controllers. And so, but they were just out of date, right? We couldn't upgrade them. And so to me, it was an easy decision, guys, let's introduce them to WeatherTRAK, right? This is a great product. And this is kind of the next step for you guys.
And what I wanted to talk about very quickly, this is unique to HOAs, and maybe even unique to Colorado. I don't think so. But I found out that when you're talking to HOAs, and specifically the manager, their top line cost items are first, the management cost, second, the landscape cost, and third, the water bill, right? So when you're talking about this, these are issues that really hit the bottom line. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%, right? And they're coming to us as, professionals of like, what can we do as a HOA or as a property management board to help reduce some of these utility costs, right? And, for us, I mean, it's, as landscapers, it's easy. It's irrigation, right? That's the one thing that you can really control, right? You can't automatically just shrink the landscape and put in, more concrete or extend the houses out. Like it's okay. Step one, it's the water, right? And there's a lot of those things. It's like I said, it's the health of the plant material. It's the curb appeal look of it. It's the value of the landscape, right? And the both the property management and the board looks to us to how do we increase this value, not decrease it, right? Not make our property look worse and our water bills are continuing to going up, right? And using WeatherTRAK and knowing the ROI of WeatherTRAK, right? It makes sense to, and this is the kind of the next step.
Right, absolutely. And so as we start to talk about WeatherTRAK, the field folks, the account managers, the customers, everybody who's kind of in the ongoing conversation, we talk about what the risks and the costs of unmanaged water look like. Okay. So now let's move on to talking about what the actual sales process looks like. You've done all your homework. You know the system, you know the customer, you've asked all the right questions. What is the next step? Is that call a meeting, or is there something in between there that I'm missing?
Yeah, sure. So what I've done in the past is gone on there and said, okay, look, here is our recommendations of what we can do now, right? There's some things that we can do hydraulically, right? There's some things that we can do just on the controller side of things, right? On the electrical side of things. And so what I normally do is I give them a kind of a 3-tier thing, like, hey, here's the top of the line. This is what we recommend. And here are a couple middle line, low end, but just to get them thinking about ET, just about ET, right? And a lot of that is more of a training or a coaching session to them about what is ET.
And I would add into that, what is sprinkler efficiency, right? Those two things in this conversation go hand in hand. What could the technology provide, and what are the battles we're facing today?
Right. No, it's a great point. So once you kind of talk about that and letting them know kind of, where their irrigation system is at, efficiently, then what I do is I, set up a meeting with the client, right? With anybody who's a decision maker, right? I want the board over there. I want homeowners. I want the property management group. And then I just kind of lay it all out, guys. This is what we recommend. And having literature from WeatherTRAK, from the other potential other companies out there, and to give them that information and to show it to them, say, hey, look, guys, here's where we're at, right? And then kind of talk through the kind of the Q&A of why is one different than the other, right? Laying, a map out of, hey, here's your controllers, here's the zones of where everything is located. Here's your higher water usage, your lower water usage, your backflows, right? All of that, just trying to get a map together so they can have an idea of what it is. And then from there, usually that kind of stirs up a lot of the questions. It's like, yeah, we're excited, we're interested in this. And then to me, it's a quick call. Ben Coffee, hey man, I need you over here, right? And that's when I spin it off to you and let you go after it.
What I want to interject here, I live locally with Brad, so we team up in person a bunch of times. But there is a sales tool that we are on the horn right now with almost every distributor we have. I see Site One on the phone. I see them all. So something that you should know we use every time when we get to this point in the conversation is a great WeatherTRAK sales tool called the site analysis or the water analysis report, where Brad will, in his conversations with the HOA, collect their water bill data and any irrigation knowledge that they have, any maps or any sort of kind of information we could use that play a part in this conversation. He gives them to us and we create this water analysis report that is customized for each individual user, right? So we have the title page that has their monument or something that says their name on it. To Brad's point, we go through, our hydro analytics team goes through, takes the map of the site, takes whatever information Brad has provided and tries to figure out exactly what we're watering out on that site. Not only the number of square feet, but the difference between watering turf and watering trees and shrubs. And we try and get a very, very accurate look at the irrigation that needs to happen on that site. Then we go in and we put in their water bills, right? This graph represents the water information that Brad gets from the HOA from the community manager, whatever magic tree he goes to get the water information. This is often the sticking spot, but we put in their historical water information. And on top of that, we take the landscape that we figured out and calculate what WeatherTRAK would have watered during that time, right? We take our accurate to the square kilometer ET, figure out what the ET is for that square kilometer and what WeatherTRAK would have delivered. And then we put it side by side on this graph, showing you month by month through the billing period, what you would have paid with WeatherTRAK, different than what you actually paid on your water bills, right? And that looks like this. This is really the conversation point. Brad, you want to tell me how you present this piece?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So during that intermediate process of talking about ET controllers, them getting excited, that next step is now, okay, let's bring you, let's get some more information from you, right? I need, so all I do is I go up there and just ask them, guys, do you guys give me, water bills or information on past water bills? So then I, just like Ben said, I turn this over to Ben after receiving the water bills, a site map, square footages of beds, turf, native, perennial beds, things like that. Turn that over to WeatherTRAK. WeatherTRAK usually, sends it over fairly quickly and says, okay, here's the potential return on investment. So what I'll do then is work with my account manager or the irrigation techs and say, hey guys, this is kind of what we're looking at. Does this make sense? Are we off on this thing? And most of the time they're pretty accurate. From that point on is then I'll schedule another meeting with the board, the decision makers, along with Ben or a WeatherTRAK representative, so that we can go in there and present this information. And once we present that information of, hey, by saving 37% of your water bill year one, it's an easy sell after that, right? And that's the good thing about this, because they're true. And for what it's worth, I think they're a little conservative on it, because we've seen much bigger gains, right, during this process.
Or under promise and over deliver, right?
Yes, exactly. So this is, to me, once you kind of, in the beginning, all it is just gathering information, understanding the system, understanding the pros and cons of that irrigation system, understanding the client, what they want, what they need. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts of why, right? And here is really where it comes down to.
Exactly. So back to today's topic, what should an HOA expect when switching to WeatherTRAK? Part of it is this homework phase, right? Part of it is collecting the water bills, understanding the usage, know that the contractor is doing the heavy lifting, but he might ask you for some things along the way that are important to the process. So that's what we expect. Another thing that I would like just to touch on super quickly is the level of detail involved in this report. How getting this report is a tangible change in the conversation between you and the HOA, between, hey, ET controllers save us 30%, to, hey, on your landscape last year, we could have saved 37%, right? Those are two totally different conversations. Can you speak to kind of how you treat that and what you see from your customers?
Yeah, and so I think looking at the percentages is great. Hey, we can save a lot of this percentage, but when it comes down to it's dollars, right? They're looking at, hey, do we need to raise assessments, or what do we need to cut because we're continuing to see overall costs increase as the years go on? And then when they can actually look at it and say, hey, we can save you X amount of dollars per year, that's where everybody kind of is like, oh, now I understand why, right? And then
it makes it a business decision, right? When you see it in actual numbers, it turns from a feel-good decision to a sound business decision.
Correct. And then what a lot of times what we've seen is they've already budgeted that money for that following year, and knowing that, hey, I could save a potential 10 grand. Well, how can we use this? Can we upgrade our landscape? Can we upgrade something else on the houses themselves or the monument sign, and add that additional curb appeal because the money that they're saving in the water on the first year?
So very routine in this conversation, we use the words return on investment, right? How long does it take for the water savings to pay for the entire project. That is offset by not only water costs, but rebates that your local jurisdictions or your local water agencies might offer as incentive.
Yep.
And we see, Brad and I in our backyard see water savings. I always talk about the 3-year return on investment. Brad, do you think that that is fair to say?
I think that it is fair to say. I can tell you on this one particular patio home community that we did, we presented, I think it was in the low 30s of, hey, it's going to probably take a few years to to get this return on investment. And they had a lot of controllers, and it was pricey. It was close to, I think, $100,000 of just pure controllers. There was a lot of controllers. And at the time too, they didn't have that money, or weren't willing to, or they didn't have the money to do all the upfront costs because they wanted to do everything at once. So what they did is they financed the controllers through WeatherTRAK, right? And it was a 4-year finance, but the amount of water savings that we saved them by, changing out the controllers, by changing out some heads, by removing a little bit of turf and putting some rock in to eliminate that, they were able to pay the entire amount off in 1 year based on pure water savings. It was awesome. And
right.
and
so that 3-year is rough. It's going to be different for every
totally.
site, but definitely the return on investment is real and a tangible conversation to have with those customers.
Absolutely.
All right. So what I want to jump back here. The reason, now we get into the meat. The reason I think of you as a great guest is I want to get into starting here, what analysis and assumptions that we make that kind of the customer needs to understand, right? When we, this is part of the report that we put in there, the analysis and assumptions, the things we assumed about your irrigation system or your site that helped us come about these numbers. And the reason we put that in there is because it really is different for every site. It is really different for every station. And so we say, we used our standard WeatherTRAK sprinkler efficiency, and we used our standard precip rate to figure all of this out. If that is different, then your results might be different.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, how does that play in your conversation, and how does that lead you to where we're going from here?
Sure. And it's when you talk to the client, it's not one of those things where it's like, hey, this is the one thing that just fits all, and once you put this in, all your problems are gone and you're going to save all this money, right? You got to make realistic expectations to them. Like, look, there are some upgrades that we're going to have to do because of how intelligent the WeatherTRAK system is. It will start to show inefficiencies of your landscape, right? But that's why we're there to make those adjustments, right? When we talk about changing out heads on, maybe match precipitation rate heads, or if you've got pressure or flow issues, right? We can start altering those things to help increase that efficiencies, to help create more savings on the water there, right? And so it's not only talking about the controller itself, but it's also talking about the small details of the controller itself and what it can do, and also the total irrigation system, right? Is to be upfront and honest with them. If they've got a brand new system and it's really, cut and cookie cutter, right? That's an easy swap out, right? But when you've got an older system, it's 20 years old plus, right? You're going to need to make changes, right? There's going to be things that just don't quite work with this new system, or it's going to show the signs of inefficiencies that you just jumped at, that you have to go through.
Can I argue with you 1 second? All right. So
Absolutely.
I agree with what Brad just said, but to play devil's advocate, if we have been keeping it green up until this point with standard technology, we can turn that program down as far as we need to keep it green. What
Right.
Brad's talking about is helping them achieve that conservation goal, right? And the WeatherTRAK highlighting where your system is deficient and making changes. But if it's a matter of cost, know that we in the meantime, like that is a conversation you want to have eventually, but year one, they just bought controllers. We can turn those stations that are bad up enough to keep them green. So it doesn't mean all costs all the time, but it does mean we show you where your investment would pay off best.
Sure. Yep. 100%.
Okay. So we are running out of time here, Brad. So I want to go very quickly. We talked about the literature available, both technical literature as well as the product literature, the sales documents, all available on our website at hydrapoint.com/WeatherTRAK, right? Where you'll go and you can find tech specs and design documents, as well as full color pictures and all the fun stuff to put in your customers' hands. Those are great pre-sales tools. I want to talk about the cost, right? Now we get into what those numbers actually mean in the field. And after we install, what can the HOA expect as normal growing pains, as normal bumps in the road?
Sure.
And this is one that I created this slide for you because this is a conversation that you are great at having.
Yeah. And so like looking on the left-hand side, you've got that dark emerald green, right? The majority of that time, if you get that color, you are overwatering your turf, right? Obviously, we don't want to go down to the far right where it's death, right? Or dormant for the entire season. We want to find that kind of that happy medium, right? But that's the conversation that you have to have with the client, and just to let them know, guys, there will be signs of stress during this transition period, right? Because the landscape most of the time is so used to just being overwatered. You know how to, guys, the root zone is very shallow, right? And so when you introduce the WeatherTRAK controllers, it's a smart controller, right? It'll, instead of just putting down, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on the rotor pop up, right? And it's going to go, 2 start times a night. This will go into 3, 4, 5 start times, but at a lower amount, right? The whole idea is to get those roots down.
Cycle and soak, baby.
Exactly.
Cycle and soak.
Right. And so what we've done and what I've done in the past is given them hey, this is what you had before. This is what the expectations is. I'm a visual guy. I want to be able to see it. So then I think it helps the HOA and the homeowners to understand, hey, when this thing goes in, yes, we're going to save water, but it's also going to show a little bit of stress. And just to be realistic of the expectations, to say, guys, it's going to be that kind of that green, little yellow at times, but we can also still override it a little bit to make adjustments to get it up a little greener, if that's what they prefer, right? But just having that expectation and just laying it out for them, just so they know.
Right. I think it is important. The message that I hear you say a lot is, first of all, we're going to take you from this emerald green. So this is an unhealthy green, an unhealthy way of watering and maintaining plant life. We are going to implement water conservation, where we are going to help your plants decide exactly how much water they need to stay healthy and deliver exactly that much. And there will be an effect on the health of the site. And as we walk into this world of conservation, we're going to try not to give you that emerald green, that overwatered green. We're going to try and dial that back into something much more healthy. And through that, there is a process of trial and error. Mm-hmm. We will see some stations overwatering. We'll see some stations underwatering. We'll make adjustments as we go. And inherent in that is sometimes those adjustments go too far, and we're here to catch that, but we'll make the changes. You just got to understand that that's part of the process, right? It's not going to be all emerald from here on out, because we are trying to observe water conservation. We are trying to get the gallons down, and there is an effect on the landscape that goes along with that. To Brad's point, my point was mostly management, right? I am going through and I'm making adjustments, and we're going to try and walk that line. And sometimes as a manager, I'm going to miss it. But to Brad's point, there's also a cost of this green is unhealthy plant life or unrooted plants, right? If the plant never has to look for water, it's always been overwatered, you're going to have very shallow root depths. And as we try and apply that scientific irrigation, we might, as water managers, choose to let that plant stress, choose to let that go and develop the root system that it needs to be healthy on the right amount of water, right? So all things that need to be considered by the HOA, or at least all things that the HOA needs to be aware of beforehand, because it will be a reality coming up when they implement the smart controllers. Fair enough, Brad?
That is fair enough.
And then the one thing that Brad already talked about, this is only true on HOAs that watch way too closely. This was my story. When I was a contractor, I had an HOA, my first WeatherTRAK site, and it was a retirement community. So they always watched the sprinklers run. And I got the call all the time, hey, the sprinklers outside my window used to come on at 2 a.m. and run for 30 minutes. And now I never see those things run. And that's because watching WeatherTRAK run is different than watching standard irrigation, right? Brad talked before about how we have as an irrigation guy, I know the standard for rotor heads and pop-ups, right? 30 minutes, 15 minutes. And the old sprinklers would just perform as expected, would march forward like a good little soldier. 2 o'clock came, 30 minutes, move on, right? With WeatherTRAK, it is what one of my contractor calls the Bellagio effect, right? You don't really know from night to night what the irrigation is going to look like, because WeatherTRAK is really, first and foremost, deciding which stations need to run. Second of all, and if we don't need to run, we take the day off. So not everything is running every night, which is different. And on top of that, we use a scientific formula to figure out how much we can run at a time before the runoff is going to start to happen, before water starts going down the gutter. Brad talked about how we split it up better. And you see that. But even still, once we figure all that out, we figure out how to best fit it into the water window to make it keep running as much as we can, as fast as we can. So it might not start at station one. Likelihood it's not going to start at station one. It's going to start over there. It's going to bounce around. You can watch it, and it's kind of fun to try and guess, but it doesn't run like your old irrigation system. So something that HOAs need to be aware of is, if people are watching, it looks way different during the time of irrigation. Brad, anything to say on that?
No, I think it's a great point too, because you're right. Some people do understand, hey, my irrigation pops on at 6 a.m. every morning, right? Or Monday through Thursday and Saturday. It does change that, right? And that's the educational part of things that, as me as a contractor, needed to explain to the HOA that this is realistic, right? This is what's going to happen. And just so they understand expectations. It's kind of like that versus the dark green, turf appearance, right? Same situation.
You're right, exactly. Just being transparent. It's not an issue unless we don't deal with it, right? It will become the best way to deal with that is head on, right? We
Correct.
Tell them that it's going to happen before it happens, rather than waiting till somebody complains.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
All right. And that is, so the one thing I wanted just to bounce off you to finish up, right, is as a contractor, I wanted to make sure we emphasize that water management is a path. It is not a product, right? So you as a contractor are selling a full-scale water management solution to your customer. And we always argue about where WeatherTRAK fits in there. But I want to hear from you kind of when you're talking to them about the full-scale water management, what are you talking to them? What are the most common topics that come up?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with overwatering is usually the biggest thing, right? Because that equals dollars, right? They just see dollars running down the street, and it's true, right? So when I talk to them, I like to talk about a couple different things. One is their current condition of their irrigation system, right? That's one portion of it. You know, you can dive into the small details on that one, but then the other one is the kind of the controller side and what's really important to them, and just to understand that why they're looking at doing these things, and what's their source of pain, and how do we as a contractor change that, right, and make it better for them. And I think WeatherTRAK is a great product for this situation.
That's awesome. All right, so I'm out of time. I've already gone over, but I apologize. Thank you for those of you who are still here. Jeff Smith asked a question based on my wife's injury, slipping on the ice. He said maybe we can implement a low temperature pause, like we have a rain pause, to prevent the slip and fall threat. Jeff, I already solved the problem. I didn't have on my rain sensor, I have an option of a rain freeze sensor. So when it gets to freezing temperatures, it doesn't run. And I did not have that model on there. So now I do. So absolutely remember, with WeatherTRAK, that would be hard because we are a once a day weather update. We are not streaming weather data. So it would be hard to say, hey, we are still in the freezing temperatures today, let's delay. Not to say it's impossible, but that's why it doesn't exist today. Brad Schuster, I ask all my first time guests, what does WeatherTRAK save you? I
don't know if it saves me, but what it does is it helps create stronger, deeper relationships with our clients. And that's what is most important to us. And that's what it helps, because then you start, it's a thing that you just kind of build that trust on, right? Because you're telling them, hey, you can save water, your property's going to look better. And it happens. That's what I like about WeatherTRAK on that side. And plus the amount of support that WeatherTRAK gives us it's so different from any other ET controllers that out there. I mean, any questions I have, I know that I can call you, our local reps, the 1-800 number of the customer service line. That, I mean, to answer your question, that's what it saves me from my irrigation techs and my account managers trying to troubleshoot. I know who to call. I get answers right away.
I love it. All right. So with that said, I want to very quickly plug the Dropped series that's coming up. It'll be the last 5 episodes of Smart Water Wednesdays. You should come check us out. We'll have some great WeatherTRAK champions competing for WeatherTRAK swag. Next, we're always here to help. Contact customer support if you need support. Like Brad said, we are pride ourselves on the support mechanism. And next week, look forward to having you back, where we're going to talk about managing your station programming with OptiFlow. Tom Matthews is a great user and a very experienced water manager, likes OptiFlow. We're going to delve into kind of the details of the questions he had about station programming and how that applied to OptiFlow. So we'll see you next week. In the meantime, I'm Ben Coffey. I've been your host. And Brad, you want to give anybody a shout out before we close out?
No, I just want to say, thanks to you to, kind of put this on. I mean, it's great information to have on there. And I just want to say thanks on my behalf from Keesen. So thank you.
You bet. And thank you. And thank Keesen. And we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.